literary excellence. Introducing you to K. Satchidanandan, sorry if my pronunciation is right. Harrison Kelly, Jeet, Thayil, Manhad, Narula, Mukund, Padmanabhan.
With the mic too.
Mukund, that's fine. Okay, Alastair, Niven, introduced by Mita. Please, I would request you to switch off your mobiles.
Thank you, Nina, and a very warm welcome. I hope all of us have had a good cup of tea. So we are on to debating on what our literary prize is all about, whether they are compounded by media hype or is it all about excellence only. And with us we have a very distinguished panel today with Sachida. I'm sorry, I can only call you Sachida, nothing else.
Sorry, I'm going to butt in, but we have to say this, that Manhad is the founder of the DSC prize for South Asian literature. He introduced this prize, Manhad.
I was coming to that next. Okay, we'll start with Sachida being associated with the Janpith and the Sahitya Academy Award. Manhad, as just been mentioned, being the founder of the DSC prize for South Asian literature. Mukund Padmanabhan, the senior associate editor of the Hindu, associated with the Hindu Literary Prize. We've got Jeet, Thayil, who has founded the Shakti Bhatt Prize. And we have Harrison Kelly with us, associated with the Man Asia Literary Prize. And Alastair Niven, who has been on the jury of many, many literary awards, including the Booker and the DSC. So are we obsessing over the hottest thing, or are we obsessing over the best written book? And are literary prizes actually the custodians of our literary world and culture, or are we rating books beyond their merits? Some of the questions which I'm sure will come up and will be discussed with this distinguished panel, which I will happily now bow out of. Over to all of you.
Thank you very much, Mita. Normally when I chair a panel like this, I like to sit in the position that Mita is in so that I can survey the scene and not sort of play a Wimbledon tennis match, you know, like this. I feel a bit like a colonial viceroy at a convention of Indian princes, but sitting on the throne in the middle. I've just come earlier in the day from a very happy experience, which was to be part of the jury of the wonderfully newly established DSC Prize for South Asian Fiction. I'm open to bribes, but unless they're big enough, I'm not going to say anything that might indicate who has won that prize. But I don't think it's giving anything away to say that the 5 judges had a mutual respect, that we had all read all the books with tremendous passion and enthusiasm, that we didn't agree completely on the long list. With some difficulty we arrived at a short list, and today we've had an extremely generous discussion leading to a conclusion that has satisfied everyone. So it's been a happy experience, but that hasn't always been the case. You've referred, Mita, to the fact that I've been involved in judging some other literary prizes, and you mentioned in particular the Booker. It's an enormous privilege in Britain to be invited to be a judge of the Booker Prize. I think it's one of the great accolades, really, and I will confess that I felt very, very flattered to be one of the judges in the year I did it, which was in 1994. We managed to come up with a very controversial result, and the book we chose, I think, sold fewer than any other winner of the Booker Prize in its 40-year history. But more to the point, having read the books over a period of some months, we were provided with something like 2 hours maximum, and after the photo calls, more like an hour and a half, in which to arrive at a decision. And when that decision was taken, after a lot of toing and froing, one of the judges, a very distinguished lady in Britain, marched straight out of the room, reached for the telephone, phoned Reuters, and denounced the winning book as sexist, anti-women, and an unacceptable, unworthy winner of the Booker Prize. So rather a contrast with the experience I've had today. And that says something perhaps of the range of experiences that literary prizes throw up. What I thought we would try and do today is cover the reason for literary prizes existing at all, the role of the sponsor, the role of the reader, the role of the book buyer, and are they in something what literary prizes are meant to us?
I was just telling Jeet yesterday, I judges for the Shakti Bhatt first fiction award, first book award, and we were a panel of 3, and between me and another judge who had yeah, so I was just saying that I was on the panel of judges a couple of years ago, but book award, and we were a panel of 3, and we just couldn't arrive at a decision. This is where the books are actually presented to us, and all we had to do was go through of about 6, and you know, there was just no meeting ground, simply because if Judge had wanted a novel that was sort of second on my list, then that might have been an acceptable compromise. But if he wanted something that was right at the bottom, and I wanted something that was, you know, it was hard to find an agreement.
But did you have a good chair who sorted that out?
Well, we didn't have a chair. We were just sort of all equal, and then we had this sort of that we went by. We ranked books and gave them points, and then awarded it to the you know, to a person middle of everybody's list, which is really not a satisfactory way of going about this, but I think it's instructive because it tells you that you know, when there's disagreement, or the disagreement is very wide, then you just have to measure, because you have to announce the prize. I mean, that's something that needs to be done.
It wouldn't be difficult for any one of us to look back at the year in which you were a judge, find out who the winner was in that year. It was a kind of compromise choice, sort of somewhere in the middle. That's not terribly flattering to the writer.
Well, it's not. I mean, you know, I don't think, you know, people have been flattering him. Take the book. Wasn't it A.L. once that it's a pile of crooked nonsense? It's determined by, you know, who's married to who's sleeping with who's selling drugs to who, and whose turn it is. And Kennedy was on.
I don't think I was sleeping with anyone other than my wife.
No.
Wasn't on drugs.
This is just. I mean, you know, I think it was said in this particular context, but I'm not saying. No, but you know, take the prize again. Take the time when Faye Weldon was in the chair. There was a toss-up between Salman Rushdie's Shame and Qudsiya's Okay. And I've heard this firsthand from Faye myself. There was a tie, and they decided to give it to Rushdie. That would have been a second award. And apparently someone was getting on the phone when she changed her mind, and she said, no, it has to go to Qudsiya. So all I'm saying is, you know, I'm a huge fan of prizes, but and I think they should be there. I think there's too much is made of you know, that it's just hype and so on. But I think we have to accept that there is built arbitrariness in the process, and that's something that will be there. And I think makes it exciting because it's there, because you know, it's just...
I mean, obviously any two readers have entirely different reactions to them. Harrison, have you been involved in literary prizes?
Yes, I have. So I'm from the Man Asian Literary Prize, which is based in Hong Kong. And we launched our shortlist just a couple of weeks ago in a simultaneous event in London and in Hong Kong, linked via video conference, which was as exciting. And we invited a few publishers along, and one of them was from House Publishing, which publishes The Colonel by Mahmoud Al-Atabadi, who's an Iranian novelist, our long list this year. Unfortunately, that book didn't make our shortlist, but one very interesting thing that came out of that was that the publisher told me that since Mahmoud longlisted for this year's prize, just to say The Colonel is banned. You can't get it in English language in Iran, so this book is banned. Since he was longlisted for, actually he was overnight became a celebrated Iranian writer, and all the press referred to him and this book as a very important book that should be read by everyone. So I think that actually do it's much, much more than just propel a writer, you know, into, well, I guess writers don't make multi-millions.
But couldn't that have worked the other way? The Iranian government, we're going to take very tough action against this writer. I mean, such things have happened in China, for example, when writers have been nominated for prizes.
Yeah, well, obviously we're based which is an SAR of China, so technically it is China. And we have a book on our shortlist by Yan Liangke, Dream of Ding Village, which is also banned in China. However, we've actually seen the same thing, that China Daily, Xinhua, have come and reported, and he has attracted a lot of positive attention as well, which is very interesting to see how actually the prize is you know, helping writers in that way.
So your rights argument for literary prizes, anyway, it's part of what you're saying, that it will help writers who might otherwise be in difficulty.
It can do, but obviously, yes, you know, we're a political prize.
That's a powerful point. It's a powerful point.
Yeah.
Jeet, have you been a recipient of a prize?
Yes, I have. A very, very long time ago, I had a New York Arts Prize for poetry. I think it was, I forget how many $1,000s, but at the time I was a student, it felt like a lot of money, and I bought myself a computer, an Apple, yeah, and moved uptown, which was a mistake. Actually, I had an anecdote. The year that Mukund mentioned the Shakti Bhatt, by the way, my family founded the Shakti Bhatt First Book Prize, which at the time we thought kind of differentiated from other prizes was that there was no prize in the country that awarded money for a first book, and it seemed like a very worthwhile. So that's how it came into being. The year that Mukund was one of the 3 judges, when the prize was awarded, a magazine, a Delhi magazine, nameless for the moment, although I'll give you a hint, the name of the magazine ironically means the opposite of closed. And if there's anybody from the magazine here, we'll talk later. Anyway, so the magazine said that this is a very small kind of parochial prize run by Delhi people that awards Delhi writers and is basically meaningless. So I would like the record to speak for years now, and in those 4 years we have awarded 2 Pakistani authors, one South Indian author who's now based in Sri Lanka, and one author in origin who lives in the US. So to call it parochial, I think, is just an unkindness. And it makes me wonder, even the title of the session, for instance, the whole idea of hype. Why is it that we talk about hype in terms of literary product, in terms of books? When a movie is released and they hype it 6 months ahead, and the actor gets his haircut and talks about his haircut, and you know, when cricket matches happen, and you know, you're talking about girlfriend and or his wife and the tattoo that she's just got, nobody talks about hype. But when it comes to books, we talk about hype. It seems just you know, using a cannon to kill an ant. These are books. They're written by writers. Writers don't get much to begin with. You know, if there's any kind of prize that comes their way, or money that comes their way, or fame that comes their way, it usually comes so late in life that it doesn't matter. So be a little more generous.
That's helpful that you've actually admitted that the winning of money was important in the first instance, and that subsequently a prize that focuses on a person's achievement is itself something that will give satisfaction to the writer. I want to come on in a moment, though, to the plight of writers who never win prizes. But before we get there, Sachi, what's the story about literary prizes?
Not many, but there was a moment of embarrassment when I was heading the National Academy of Literature, when Arindhati Roy refused to take Sahitya Academy Award. She said this is given by the government of India, which has been, her general view on the government of India. Though I thought, and I still think, that the Sahitya Academy is definitely funded by the government, but it is an autonomous organization. It has never been impact. I can tell you, I was there for 10 years. The government has never asked us to, give an award to somebody or to publish a particular book. Or there are absolutely no intervention from the government or the party that role. I thought it was an autonomous institution until then, and when she said I won't take the award, it was a little embarrassing also because I admire her as a writer. I admire her courage, and I have also upheld, shared some of the views she has on several things, including the human rights question that may be coming up soon. But then, well, one has to take. But she wrote a very polite letter. She said, "Thank the Academy, thank the people who have chosen me for the award." But then, because of my disagreements with the Indian government, I'm unable to take that award. Well, I tried to persuade her, but not much, because I knew that her stand. She has her own reasons for not taking the prize, and she didn't accept it. Speaking about awards, I feel the credibility of the award depends on 2-3 factors. One is definitely the credibility of the institution that gives the award. Say Sahitya Academy or Canopy or whatever the institution, and secondly the selectors, those who select, because that also is very important, because the award reflects, I think, more on selectors and their sensibility than the book that is given the award. And thirdly, the process. I mean, do you really care? Do you really read the books and arrive at a reasonable?
Well, I want to come back to several of these points, but let us think first about the sponsorship of a prize, because we've obviously got here Manhad, Narula, and the company DSC is sponsoring both the festival and the prize, of which I'm a jury member at the moment. Can I just ask you the direct question, why? Why are you involved?
I think, looking at it from the point of view of literary excellence or compounding hype isn't really the right way to look at it, because I don't think it's either or. I think why we did this prize and why a lot of prizes are instituted isn't necessarily always to single out that one book. I mean, that is a byproduct of the process, and yes, you're trying to get to the best book, but as you mentioned, it's almost ridiculous to try and say that one book is better than others, because it's a matter of opinion. In our case, 5 people in a room, given them 50 books and said, find the one that you all like. And I think there always is an element of compromise, and there is an element of disagreement, which is the objective overall is not to identify that one book and build it up and sell more copies. I mean, for us, the objective was, let's get more people reading books and let's reading books. So if you have this prize, and and people can see there's a financial reward, not just to winning a prize, but to being a writer by getting enhanced like that, then the hype encourages that. So therefore, the hype encourages more writing, which hopefully the hype also encourages more reading. So the reasons why we did it are not so much to try and use an arbitrary process to get to one particular book that's going to win it.
There are so many things to pick up on, but the first thing the idea of the writer who offered a prize chooses not to accept it. There have been some recent cases in Britain where writers have withdrawn from their name from consideration because the ownership of the prize was rather tainted. They didn't want to be involved, and sometimes there are very, very honourable reasons for not accepting a prize. Some years ago I was very closely involved with a Commonwealth Writers' offered to Amitav Ghosh. He declined the prize, and his reason for doing so was that the prize only recognised fiction in the English language. He said around the infinite number of languages are not only spoken and written in, but published. None of these are being looked at, including, of course, the mother tongues of India, apart from English itself. Simply not acceptable, and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize was faced with a bit of a dilemma and kind of rather, legalistically, semantically redefined itself as Prize for work in the English language, allowing anyone else to set up a Commonwealth Writers' Prize for work in Maori or Hindi or something like that, which did. So in my experience, those who decline prizes usually have the most honourable reasons of integrity for doing so. They don't decline prizes at a whim. Occasionally, was it the case of Jean-Paul Sartre, someone declines a big prize like the Nobel just because they don't believe in prizes, and that's an honourable position too. But let's get back to the sponsorship. I mean, I think there is sometimes a suspicion, is there not, that the sponsors, in order to get their name in lights, who, if I may say it without offending you, Harrison, had ever heard of the Man Company before they started sponsoring the Booker and all the other big prizes? There's a lot of kudos in taking on a big prize, and you do get brownie points for it. Have you run into a difficulty with this? Have people said that your motives are maybe not of the best?
No, they haven't. However, I can't speak for Man because I don't work for Man, so I can't say particularly why they chose to sponsor our prize. But just to say that a couple of people, previously had approached them to sponsor prizes, and they had said no, not right now. But when ours was founded, they said yes. But also, they sponsor the Man Booker Prize. We are separate, the Man Booker Prize and the Man Asian Literature Prize, but we are very good friends. And one thing that they know, have told us, and also one thing that we found as well, is that Man Group are a very hands-off sponsor. They never get involved if there's any issue that they don't agree with. They would never tell us, like particularly having, a banned, novelist on a long list or a short list. That's not, they sponsor the prize and that comes along with it, really.
But are we likely to see fiction produced, as a certain number of American television programs are, which are kind of dovetail with the advertisements that will intersect the program? So you very carefully plot a soap opera so that it will reflect the washing up detergent or something like that that's going to be in the break. The name Fay Weldon has been mentioned, and she famously did produce a novel which Bulgari, the jewellers, had got some interest in, and she wove in kind of advertisements for Bulgari into the text of the novel. It was a bit of fun on her part, I'm absolutely sure, but more seriously, is there a danger that the relationship between a literary prize and a sponsor could in some devious way lead to the corruption of literature, because you're pandering to the demands of the sponsor?
I mean, I think in our case, and I can speak, Can you hear me? Hello? I mean, in our case, our company, and I think Man, from what I know as well, doesn't sell anything to anyone. In the sense that if you see the name of my company, you're not going to go out and buy a soft drink or buy a washing up detergent. So depending on the kind of organization that's doing the sponsoring, I think that also determines their intentions. For example, if this was the Name Any Soft Drink Prize, that's sponsoring this, then I could kind of buy that argument a little bit. The other thing to say is our involvement with this prize is directly as a result of our involvement with this festival. We've been doing it from the very beginning when, again, we weren't getting any benefit from the point of view of my share price doesn't go up, I'm not a listed company, no one's going to use my road more if they see the name of the company. So I think one needs to, it's a kind of a cynical and easy option to say that X person or X company is sponsoring this for self publicity in some form or the other, and fair enough, but each case has to be looked at independently. The other thing I'll say on interference, which came up as well in terms of whether a sponsor does or shouldn't, I mean, for us we were very clear, we wanted an independent process, because the integrity of the process is what determines how well received the prize is. Now, I guess you can tell us how you felt in terms of the process, being my involvement with it, and our involvement.
Well, I think you and Satchi both brought up the question of the integrity of the organisation that lies behind a prize and who is chosen to be the jurors. Can we talk briefly about this? Because hopefully there are people who have some ability to judge literature, whether that comes from an academic background, publishing background, broadcasting background, a writing background, but some authority to have an opinion that could be respected. But increasingly, there has to be weighed with that the need to get attention for the prize. So there is a temptation to bring in the celebrity judge who is a film star or a television presenter or something of that sort, and before you know where you are, you've dumbed down the prize, possibly by bringing in people whose quality of judging literature is not likely to be greatly respected. I wonder if you have any comments on that, Satchi.
Yeah, I think I sense danger there. When someone who is not well known for his or her literary sensibility, he or she may have done other things and maybe may have made a name. I think that definitely negatively affects the credibility of the prize for the time being.
Well, any other Jeet?
Which reminds me that this year's Booker Prize jury includes an actor in Downton Abbey.
And last year's was chaired by the former head of the Secret Service in Britain, whose qualities to identify spies are impeccable, but qualities to identify good literature were not proven. And she herself is the author of, I think by general agreement, some of the worst novels ever written. So it was dubious as to whether it was a good choice. But on the other hand, the result was an extremely well-greeted one, a Julian Barnes, who's a writer who should have won the Booker Prize on a number of other occasions. Mukund, you look as though you're about to speak.
No, I agree. I think the end result was very good, but I think it was the shortlist that had got panned a little because there was a feeling that it was dumbed down, and they even, I think somebody even explained that they were trying to reach out to a wider public, and there was a lot of invective. But I think all of this is good. I think you're never going to have anything like the perfect process. You're not going to have agreement. But as you pointed out yourself, the key is to do it as honestly as you can. And I think that's enough, because if we're talking about the business or the activity of reading, everybody benefits. The sponsor obviously sees some benefit. Otherwise, he's not going to sponsor money. But there's some benefit. There's a benefit for the publisher. There's a benefit for the bookseller. And I think there's a benefit for the reader. I mean, there's been a huge benefit for me. I mean, I owe a lot to the Booker. I think it's shaped my reading habits over the last many years. And it's not only because, somebody has recommended a book. Sometimes it's because there's a huge controversy about why a book is not in. Like, for instance, Zadie Smith's White Teeth wasn't shortlisted in 2000, I think it was. And there was a huge fuss in the British press about it. And I think prizes feed off controversy, and I think controversy is a good thing.
There are controversies and controversies. There are the controversies over why a particular book has been selected or not selected, but there are all the controversies of leaking personal details about the judges, or some anecdote that is often hyped up in order to give publicity to the event itself, and that's maybe a more dubious process.
Yeah, I mean, but I
stick close to my
I'm about hype. I was, I just mentioned this because I was on a visit to Britain, and the minders of that visit had set up a meeting with the writer, novelist, and politician then, Lord Melvyn Bragg. And he had this story.
Melvyn Bragg.
Yeah, and he had this story to narrate because he was also a television personality. And he says, in the early 80s, he was at the BBC on an afternoon where there was not much work, and decided, on the spur of the moment, as a lark, let's go and televise the Booker thing that's happening this evening. And he says, and I have no reason to disbelieve him, that it was TV that actually gave the Booker that spurt. It wasn't as big a prize pre-1980 or 81. And I think it's true because, you know, I scratched my head and tried to think of the number of people who won between 72 and 80, and I could only come up with 2 or 3 names. And so I think it does that. I'm sure television...
I think that's true. But I've been involved in the setting up of 1 or 2 prizes, and I've been warned that it would take 10 years for a prize really to get known in any level at all. That's not turned out to be absolutely true, but the moment television moves into it, of course, you're in a different
So my
ball
point
game.
is, if hype is what it takes, then let's welcome it.
We've been talking so far of the very elevated kinds of prizes like the Booker and the DSC, but of course there's a proliferation of prizes, aren't there? Literary prizes that identify all sorts of things like the best second novel or the best book written by a poet under 35, or you know, practically the best red-haired writer who was born in 1944 or something like that. And the fact that those sorts of prizes, almost by their nature, are not going to get any great publicity, does that minimise their value? We hope that the Booker and the DSC will get maximum exposure, but there are lots of smaller prizes that can't expect to get that degree of attention, but are still much appreciated by the people who win them. What's the value of them?
I just want to comment on this very briefly, because I think, you know, the kind of prize that Jeet has set up, I think it's very important, because what it does is it recognizes people who write a book for the first time. A lot of the prizes we have are a celebration or a recognition of achievement already. You know, people have got published, they've been reviewed, there's people at the height of their literary talents and so on. And I think it's good to have prizes that actually promote writing or promote authors in a way. And in this connection, I just want to mention a very small thing. The Hindu does, and it's something I'm involved in. We instituted a prize, a small amount, for play scripts, and we insisted that these scripts should not have been published, and it should not even have been performed. But that's a side thing. So actually, to encourage people to write new scripts, and we get lots of it every year. We've run this now for 5 years, and we actually, hived the first 3 years into a book, and the book, none of these people would have got published if we hadn't taken this effort. So I think it's a good idea. I think these small prizes, they may not be, they may not get the kind of press that the big prizes do, but I think if we can think of prizes like done, I think that would do a lot to promote.
And in a specialist field, of course, the identification of a writer, say the best Jewish novelist or something, can be very effective in drawing attention. Is going to most likely read that book, and then from that there can be a wider distribution because it might be picked up by somebody else. Mita, I'm very an all-male panel, and you and you're maybe enjoying the discussion, but do feel free to enter at any point if there's something you would like to say. Yeah, good. Sachi, did you? Yes, Jeet.
Just to pick up from what Mukund was saying, we have a clause in the first book prize which says that if the book has won a previous award, it can be nominated, less likely to win. And that is because it really does seem redundant to give the same book several prizes. So even though this is first book prize, often win several prizes. And I just wanted to mention this year's winner, which really, for me, in all these years, has been probably the most rewarding. He was a 79-year-old first-time author from Pakistan, wrote an amazing book called The Wandering Falcon. And it sat in a drawer for 40 years, and until it was discovered by his brother-in-law, who then gave it to a publisher, and then, and I think it's going to win many more prizes. It's just an amazing book. a first book.
Well, that brings us to the question of whether a prize is going to get more publicity when it rewards a writer, let us say like Julian Barnes, who is very well known, or I can think of prizes that have been won by V.S. Naipaul and Harold Pinter and all sorts of very eminent writers, almost by definition will attract more attention than a book that is won by somebody nobody's ever heard of before, or which is actually defined, be it for a previously unpublished author. The Commonwealth Writers' Prize that I've already mentioned used to be in two categories, and people like Vikram Seth and so on have won it in the past, but they have redefined it within the last year, so it will now be exclusively for previously unpublished writers. And I think they're conscious of the fact that they will lose a certain amount of publicity, but they will be talent spotting in a very exciting way that hopefully will promote writers for the future, and they feel that should be the main mission of the prize. Do you have any views on this, actually? Because, you know, giving the backing to it, do you have a preference for finding new writers or established ones?
I mean, I think, obviously, for me personally, and this, you know, doesn't speak of what we expect the jury to come up with, but I think it's more encouraging if it's someone who, like you said, doesn't already have a lot of recognition, isn't very widely known, because, you know, that as an observer of a prize is what's encouraging. And if I was a would-be author, seeing that someone who wasn't so well known is suddenly thrust into, you know, higher literary circle by winning a prize, maybe I'll be encouraged to write a book as well. Or if I'm a reader, I think, oh, I'd never heard of this guy, but because of this prize he's won, maybe I should read more of him and, you know, look at people I hadn't previously looked at. So my personal preference is if it's someone who we haven't all heard of and who isn't well recognized and established. But I think each year it's dependent on what the mood of the jury is really, and what kind of decision they come to.
I want to spare a thought. I said I'd do this earlier in the discussion for the writers who don't win prizes. Those who do, we know, particularly if it's a major award like the Booker or the DSC, are likely to see their sales dramatically increase. It's interesting to see a chart of the Booker Prize winners, how many copies they had sold before they were shortlisted, how many they sold during the period of being shortlisted, and how many they sold if they went on to be the eventual winner. And you're talking of a shift from, say, 5,000 copies to potentially 250,000, 500,000 or something like that. A fantastic explosion will follow the shortlisting, or better still, the winning of the prize. That's indisputable. But what about those writers who don't end up getting particularly noticed by the prize? Even those who are shortlisted and don't win it, it's an extremely painful experience, and I often thought it was a kind of refined form of torture not to let them know until the moment that it's announced. If I were to establish a prize from scratch, I make absolutely sure that all the writers did know in advance, because I think it spares them the anguish of that moment on the night, the Oscar-winning moment. But there are countless writers who never see their work submitted for prizes, who, if it is submitted, it doesn't end up on even a long list. I can think of, I'm sure we all can, countless writers who have ploughed on, dedicated to writing, almost without recognition. And they're not bad writers, they just haven't had the spotlight played on them. What is a literary prize not somehow underlining the pain of their predicament?
I'd just like to say something on this, which is that it's like any field really. If I was let's say an investment banker, and I toiled away for years and years to get the promotion to managing director, or whatever, a footballer, to get into a club. If it doesn't happen, I still see people winning prizes or becoming managing directors or becoming, premiership footballers, and I aspire to it. So the way as a, it's a horrible word, but the loser of a prize, let's say, which is everyone that didn't win it, should not see it as, and I hope this doesn't happen, as I've lost, but should see it as, well, he won, maybe I can win it next year or the year after. So I think so long as that hope is there, which prizes in every field it happens, so it's not really literary prizes or any other sort of prizes, it should discourage people.
Any other comments on that, Jeet?
I often think that writing is a heroic activity, you know, because if you think about what a writer does, they sit alone in a room, looking at a screen for several hours a day, and this is what happens if you commit a crime, for instance. They put you in a room, alone, and you spend a lot of time by yourself thinking your sad thoughts. And writers do this to themselves voluntarily. It's a heroic activity. And the writers who don't win prizes, I think they see themselves as heroes. And, you know, they see literature and writing not as a race where there are winners and losers, but they see themselves engaged in something higher and nobler than themselves, and that's a prize enough by itself.
It's nice to hear spontaneous applause, because that's a wonderful attitude.
No, I think not only the losers, even the winners, I think, you know, there are, I mean, they are genuine writers. I don't think they lust after prizes, or that they are going to look at another writer as a kind of role model if he or she has won a major prize. I think it's an extremely solitary enterprise, as you said, and so whether you win or you lose, and ultimately I also believe that, I do not know whether it doesn't really affect the quality of your writing. It doesn't make you a better writer or a worse writer, whether you win or lose an award. And when you judge it as literature, perhaps these awards don't ultimately matter. They do help, I'm not denying that. They do help in the sense, you know, the book is promoted, it gets publicity, copies get sold, or the writer gets some money. Well, that part is okay. But I don't think it is going to affect your writing in any way. Maybe, or unless it serves as a kind of warning that happens when a mediocre writer gets an honorable award. He may think that perhaps, you know, I don't really deserve it. Maybe I need to deserve it, and I need to write something better.
Harrison, you've got a comment on that.
Yeah, just about the long-listed and shortlisted writers that don't end up winning the prize. I think something that's particular to the Man-Asian Literary Prize, as it is Pan-Asia. So we take novelists everywhere from Iran to Japan. And one of the novels which was on our long list and has made it to the shortlist is by a South Korean novelist called Kyun Suk Shun, and it's Please Look After Mom. Now, this book in Korean has sold over 1 million copies. Outside of Korea, hardly anyone's ever heard of it. And only 2 or 3 Korean books every year get translated into English. So when Shin was longlisted and subsequently shortlisted, the press in Korea, South Korea, were over the moon about it. They thought, this is fantastic that a Korean novelist has got onto the long list. And then when she made the shortlist, that was even better news. So I think, particularly for writers who are working in, or who are translated into English, being on the long list or short list of prizes like the Man-Asian is very much a prize in itself.
I'm going to open this up now for questions from the audience. I'm sure there will be several. I see hands going up immediately, and then come back towards the end to one other question I want to ask. Now, there's a roving microphone. Can I take Murray McCartney, the tall gentleman there? And can we be very quick in passing the microphone round and very brief in our questions?
I'll be brief. It's a comment first about the role and nature of the sponsor, and I think it's slightly disingenuous to say that we can't, any of us, go out and buy the products of DSC or MAN, therefore that means they can't be promoting their product. Nor can we go out and buy the products of Rio Tinto, who I see above Alastair's head, and against whom I was protesting 40 years ago for their rape of uranium Namibian uranium. So I think you don't do it only to sell your product, but also to improve your name, and I don't think we should be shy about that. I think that's fine. We've been talking mainly, moving to prizes now, about 2 publishing thriving economies, India and Britain. My wife and I come from Zimbabwe, where we run a very small publishing house and we don't sell many books. And we have had a complaint with a particular prize, the Kane Prize for African Writing, which awards a handsome prize to a short story each year. And our argument against the prize is not that it rewards very fine writers, but it takes no notice of the publisher. And we have argued that in order for us to devote our energies in a struggling market to develop and promote writers, we also need a bit of help. Faber in Britain doesn't, and the publishers perhaps of shortlisted DSC writers don't. But in other parts of the world, I think publishing prizes neglect the publishers too much. Thank you.
I think I'm right in saying, because I'm on the board of the Kane Prize, that the prize is actually split between the writer and the publisher, so that a proportion of the money goes to the publishing company. Well, we'll have to... Question in the front here.
It's sort of partly to actually answer what you said, or to respond to what you said, is I think the opposite can be seen as well, that publishers can actually benefit from prizes like the DSC Prize and the Man Asia by coming across writing that they wouldn't otherwise have been familiar with. The Booker is, the Booker shortlist, long list, everyone seems to know who they are. They're all published in the UK and all over the world. But like the DSC Prize, only 2 of the 6 shortlisted are available at all to buy in the UK. The other 4 are not available. No one knows who they are. But this is a way that for UK publishers to come across this new writing, these new authors. They may not be new in India, but they are new in the UK. And like we saw last year's winner, H.M. Naqvi, got picked up by Penguin. And that's an example of how publishers could benefit from prizes like this. My question is, do things like, so a totally different question is, do things like TV adaptations or radio adaptations or things like that, where the shortlisted of the winner gets sort of propelled to even higher height, can that actually make a difference? Have any of you experienced that, where that's made a huge difference?
Just a very quick comment on your first point. I mean, in judging the DSC Prize, I think I speak for all the judges in saying that we've thought it was a virtue that so many of the books had been published indigenously in the subcontinent or in its immediate vicinity, that unlike some other prizes that one can get involved in where the writers live away from their own areas and get published in somewhere in the West, in New York or London, although they're writing about a place that's very far from those places, here the majority of books were very local, and that we saw as a virtue. But what about this question of adaptations and what it does to promote books? Jeet?
TV and the movies, they really have a reach that the written word doesn't have, for better or worse. And thinking about Oprah, for instance, the Oprah Book Club, which is something that I think is even bigger than the Booker, because if you're an author whose book is kind of given the Oprah stamp, it immediately means sales beyond your wildest imaginings. But interestingly, there are authors who would resist that. I'm thinking of Jonathan Franzen, who refused to go on the Oprah show because he thought it would be a dumbing down. And of course, eventually he did, and he wrote an excellent essay about not going on that show. I think that was for the corrections, before the last one. But even refusing to go on, I think, kicked the sales of the book up tremendously. And you have the point is, whatever it takes to sell a book, it's not a bad thing. And there are often adaptations of books that I personally prefer to the book. And I'm thinking, for instance, of the Philip K. Dick book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which became the amazing movie Blade Runner.
There's been a huge revival of interest recently in some of the great classics because they've been newly filmed or adapted for television. I think it's almost undeniable that the link, you know, if something's adapted, it's going to add to its sales enormously, unless the adaptation is a complete flop. Any other questions? Yes.
Hello.
Right at the back there. Yes. Hand up. Yes. Just there. The gentleman's hand. Oh, sorry. There was one. The mic was already here, was it? And then further back. Okay. When you're asking a question, it helps if you can stand up, actually. So.
I think Mukund mentioned that by these kind of book awards, etc., helps people know more about books and helps the reading culture, because books that were listed, but also that didn't get listed and the controversy around it. But don't you think? But in my opinion, I think that also is having a negative effect on what we're reading, because end up reading only those books that are listed or in controversy because they're not listed. For instance, I mean, how many books on alternate sexualities have been listed in all these years? Very few that I read when I was growing up. Or graphic novels, for instance. And, you know, are we saying they're not literature then?
Or books that are published on the internet or something of that sort.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, you know, I see where you're coming from. You know, and there's some truth in what you're saying. Richer because of the controversy, gets richer because of the spats, the, you know, all of that. It would be, I think, in my opinion, a much poorer price without it. And so it is in that context I mentioned that Teeth got a damn sight more publicity because it was not shortlisted than if it had. I mean, there was there was just an outrage about it. Similarly,
implication of the question, though, whether people are being steered towards a kind of approved list of award-winning books, and not really, that's overlooking all the other books that don't get on the award.
Well, I mean, to that, my short answer would be, I think the process of steering happens well before an award is given. It happens with reviews, it happens with the space a newspaper may allot to a review. Maybe, you know, who publishes it? Maybe the bigger publishers get bigger reviews. But I think that is the nature of the beast, you know, and that's something the award is not going to change.
I suspect it's a more profound question than we've time to address, but there are all sorts of alternative ways of publishing books these days, and at the moment, most of the prizes, are very conventional. And the point I did want to raise before we finish this discussion is about the submission process, which is very often the publisher's favourite book, and putting it in for competition. If that is an adequate way or not is perhaps something we should just think briefly about. What do you think?
I mean, I think that it isn't adequate in that there's a level of judging before the judging, if you see what I mean, in that the publisher may have 5 eligible books and he or she decides 3 to send in depending on the prize. And the very fact that they've first of all selected to publish the book is another level of judging that's taken place. But from a practical standpoint, with the DSC prize, we said anyone can send in even an unpublished work, and you had, you know, 300, 400, 500 entries coming in. To be a jury of 5 read through those is just impossible. So I mean, from a logistical standpoint, while it's not ideal, having these kind of filters beforehand makes it easier logistically. That's all I'd say on that.
But there are alternative methods. Is it the Impact Award that takes note, very strongly takes note of readership to nominate, and library loans affect the choice of books and so on, which wouldn't work in all parts of the world, but where there's a thriving library system, it may be an alternative way of submitted. An alternative way would be a jury I was once an onlooker to rather than involved directly in, where a group of sort of peer writers chose and there were no submissions, they just sat around and talked and decided this was the writer they wanted to honour. There are alternative ways to the conventional ones, I think. Another question from the audience is the gentleman. Yes, that's the one. That's
yes.
It.
Actually, it's not really a question, but just a comment on the deliberations that I've just between the members of this very learned quorum. I just want to say that when a person decides to be a writer or be any sort of a change agent, it's not like working like a teller in a bank or any other regular job. Mostly, a person does that when he is inside him and he wants to share that gift with the world. He would, more than anything, be happy if even one person who reads that get inspired by the work. So I think the prize really is respect here. And that is true not just for writers but for any change agent. For example, if you talk about European fashion designers and the avant-garde fashion movement, or the 90s grunge rock, whereby they created their own audience and they somehow honored and even made money off it. So I feel it's not really when a person writes a book he has that prize money in mind, but the flip side is that we shouldn't also be very quick to crucify corporates like the DSC, for example, because just like somebody had earlier said that with writers, if the DSC or any other corporate gives this money to some writer, at least somebody is getting that money, and at least somebody has that initiative to write. So I guess even if it's to somebody who's not the perfect recipient of that award, I think everything starts with, sometimes it gets bad. So I really don't think there's something so unholy about
You've made a
these prizes.
very balanced point. Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that? I think there's a question here and there's one at the back, and they may have to be the last. Yes, the one at the front first. Yeah. Oh, already got the mic at the back. Okay, ask your question.
Okay. You mentioned about on panels. Rather like having a commoner on a board of directors of a public company,
yes.
Why thought given to having one person from the reading public? Because in the end, it's the public that buys the books. So perhaps some of these panels could be more representative if you had a commoner as one of the judges. How
would you do it? Would you go into a first person you saw?
Well, almost they can all, you know, there may be a submission. I mean,
yes.
how do you pick someone for the board of directors to come and sit there? I suppose someone has
a
to
vox
apply.
pop element.
Yes, a vox pop.
Yeah,
exactly.
Perfectly reasonable point. I think we'll log it, but I can't myself see any objection to that. Has anyone got a comment on it?
One way to gauge somebody's qualifications to be a reader would be if they could send photographs of their bookshelves.
Themselves next. And then the last question was right at the front here, yes. Microphone's just reaching you.
My question is to you, Alastair. Just
could you stand up, and then I think it's easier for people at the back to hear.
My question is really to you, Alastair. Just wanted to check, this entire idea about the next title of the winning author. So, for example, if Arvind Adiga came up with The Last Man in the Tower, and you're judging, and he's a part of the shortlist with, say, 2 averagely known writers, 3 not so known writers, does that color your opinion? Because a writer has previously won so many awards, and this is his next work, and it's that much more hyped, and there's that much more expected out of it.
You've addressed it to me. It's a difficult question because you can't not be influenced by, first of all, the reputation of a writer, and then your reading experience of the writer. I'm assuming that the name is someone that I will know something about and have been impressed with, and I will read that book with particular interest. But it can prejudice you almost against them rather than for them, which is equally unfair. And you might be thinking, this is an amazing new talent to be reading alongside this very well-established writer. I just hope that one fair-minded and even-handed in the process. I mean, I can tell you the year I judged the Booker Prize, and others have had the same experience, one or two very well-established writers on the list, but the majority were, at that time, really not very well known and have subsequently become so. People like Ramesh Gunnar, Alan Hollinghurst, Abdulrazak Gurna were all on the shortlist that year. So I just hope the question is that one should be as fair as possible, but whether one is tempted at times to be over-influenced by the established reputation. What would be entirely wrong, and it has happened with certain, is that it's been awarded to someone implicitly for a lifetime service of good conduct, rather than because this particular book was the best book of the submitted for the prize. People say, well, isn't it about time he or she got the prize because they'd missed out on it so many times in the past? And I think that would be a wrong motive for awarding a prize. Anyone else? Mukund.
I think it's sort of extremely relevant question. I've been now three awards, and this issue always comes up. But I don't think I don't think the bias is in favor of an established writer, if that's what you suggested. I think usually it's the other way around. Called upon to just judge the best book, and then you have a fellow judge tell you, look, this money is not going to mean anything to this person. If he actually gave it to so-and-so who's written his first novel or second novel, it's going to mean a whole lot. I mean, and we'd be doing something new rather than, recognizing somebody who's got many awards and who probably this doesn't mean something too. And I think this is important, and the bias actually works. I think juries want to do not to be recognized in their own way through their work. And so sometimes the sort of conventional or the obvious choice is not the one that they go for, and they want to make a statement of a certain sort. Okay, let's give it to a first-time novelist.
Do any of you want to add one very, very quick final point, if it could be brief?
Just to add to that, I was on the jury of the Hindu Literary Prize this time, and the shortlist was published. We had very, very well-known authors. Their names are public, so I can very well say. Amitav Ghosh was there, Anantamurthy was there, who are two of the best-known authors. Then all the members of the jury felt that, well, exactly like this, that perhaps it's not going to mean much to them. We should rather encourage a young and talent. And it went to the first novel by another, Rahul Bhattacharya. He had written a book, but it was on cricket. This is his first novel. So it often works like that. I think I agree with you.
Manhad, do you want to make a comment on this, or are you going to forego it? Harrison?
Yeah, I just want to say that the only instructions that we ever give our judges at the Man Asian is for the book that has the most literary excellence. We never look at reputation. If they've won a previous prize, it doesn't exclude them. We just say the best book out of these. We had 90 books submitted, and that's our criteria, really, just literary excellence, whoever that is.
I think the question, though, is, can you remain so totally detached? I mean, if a book is in Barnes, it's difficult to discount the fact that he is a very well-established and very well-known writer, even though you're trying to be as objective as possible.
But never suggest that
you don't guide
should
anyone.
Go to debut or should go to Murakami.
And Jeet, would you like a last comment?
Yeah, just to say that the First Book Prize, the first year, 4 years ago when we instituted it, we had 33 entries. And this year we had 64. And that doesn't include books that for some inexplicable, mysterious reason publishers don't submit. But it just goes to show that there's a lot of books being published and a lot of published. And of course, it's not connected that there's a First Book Prize and therefore there are more first books in the market, but it is a good time for a small prize that.
And I think it's true to say that some of the very best-selling and most successful writers in the world today have never won literary awards at all, and not because they're necessarily J.K. Rowling. Many popular writers here in India and throughout the world, there are plenty of hugely important and interesting writers who simply have managed to get the recognition of a literary award. Anyway, I think it's Mita who's going to probably have the last word, but I just want personally to thank my fellow team. I think it's been a lively discussion. And look out for the announcement tomorrow of the DSC prize winner. Thank you.
I think it's been a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure remained unanswered could be answered over cups of tea outside, or maybe a glass of wine. That's better at this time of the evening. But with that, and we're looking forward to the announcement of the prize tomorrow, I'd like to thank you, because I think all of you came up with very, very relevant points, and the debate has to keep going on, because if we didn't have prizes being done, then all of sharing their views with you. So we have to look forward to many more prizes being constituted, because there's things like, in this world of in social media and publishing coming up, there's a question mark there about those kind of books. There's a question mark there as a want of many more prizes for translated works, which applies not only to India, all over various other countries with various other languages being spoken and written. So with that, we'll close the session for the evening, and we hope to see you all back tomorrow. Thank you.